We can learn the doctrine of the Trinity pretty easily. We make it fairly easy to learn the doctrine. Every time all you have to do is look at my hand. When I do give the blessing, I always bless people in the traditional way with the two natures of Jesus Christ and the three persons of the Holy Trinity in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. It's not too hard to learn the doctrine of the Trinity, that there are three that are also somehow one and somehow three. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, that the Father and the Son breathe their love, and that love is the Holy Spirit who breathes and pours the love of God then into our hearts, and then we return that love to God, and we are caught up in the life of the Trinity. We have been invited into and made part of the life and the love of the Trinity. The doctrine is not so hard to understand. What is more difficult is to recognize the Trinity in our own lives. What does it mean? What does it mean for our living to be participating in the holy and most blessed Trinity of divine life of three persons who are also one person that we are caught up in? What does it mean for the living of our lives? It's not just a doctrine. It's something that works within us. And we don't always recognize it. It was 1938. The Nazis had annexed Austria, and they had made a treaty with the Swiss not to allow the Jews who were trying to escape Austria, because thousands of Jews were fleeing Austria and trying to get into Switzerland because it was technically a neutral country. But the Nazis made a deal with the Swiss government that only a certain amount of Jews would be allowed in, those who had exactly the right papers. And if they didn't have a visa stamped with a red J and a swastika, and they didn't have the right papers, they would be turned back to Austria to certain death in the death camps. And so Switzerland made this agreement. As of a certain date, all Jews who didn't have the right papers would be sent back to near certain death. Well, one of the Swiss policemen who had a border crossing, who was in charge of a border crossing, he did something extraordinary. Paul Gruninger. Paul Gruninger is considered a hero now. He's celebrated as a hero. There's a street in Jerusalem named after him. There's a plaza in Switzerland named after him. There's a plaque on his grave. But nobody understands. Nobody expected this man to be a hero. He was an ordinary, average, totally normal person. He was average student in school. He was a good athlete, but there was nothing extraordinary about him. And yet he became a hero. One of the righteous among the nations, celebrated by the Jewish people. And nobody knows why or how exactly he did it. How did this ordinary man one day sit down as a refugee came to him with his crying little children and his wife, and they were destitute. They had obviously left everything behind to flee the Nazis. And he had the legal responsibility. He had taken a vow to uphold the laws of Switzerland, and he had the legal responsibility to send them back to the death camps. And he sat down and he falsified the dates on their document so that they were backdated before the law took into play, and they entered into Switzerland, and he saved their lives. And then he did it again and again and again and again for family after family, for children who had been put on trains and who had lost because their parents had been sent to the death camps, and they had been put on trains, and just their parents with a letter from their parents hoping and praying that somehow they could get into Switzerland and get away. And again and again and again, he broke the law that he had sworn to uphold. He sat down and he changed the dates and he falsified the documents. And then the documents that he had to send into the Swiss government that said how many Jewish people he was leaving, he falsified those documents. And he saved the lives of probably 3,600 men, women, and children from the death camps. And nobody knows why he did it. He was just an ordinary guy that one day took the risk of following his love. He just took the risk of following his love, and he changed the dates so those people could live against the law of his country. Now, of course, this wasn't going to last for long. He was soon found out, dismissed from the Swiss police, state police. His pension was taken away. He was given a dishonorable discharge. He was disgraced. Rumors began to circulate that he had let people in for money or for sexual favors. He was disgraced, and he was taken to trial then. He was found guilty. He was fined. He had to pay also for the trial. He was left with nearly nothing, and his pension was gone. And for the next 30 years of his life, he eked out a living, paying every day for the lives of 3,600 people he had saved. He wasn't allowed, nobody, because he was a criminal in a town, in a culture that highly values keeping the law, he was not allowed, there was no way he was going to have steady employment. Nobody would give him a decent job. He sold raincoats for a while. He sold animal feed. He eked out a living for 30 years for saving the lives of 3,600 people, men, women, and children who would have been sent back to the death camps. He eked out a living in disgrace and betrayal, with rumors, false rumors about him, being shunned as a social pariah in his own land by his own people for 30 years. And nobody can figure out why he did it. He wasn't by the end of his life, the Jewish organizations that were honoring Gentiles who had saved Jews during the Holocaust, they finally honored him. And the last year of his life, he became a hero to some people. He was finally recognized. But his government still wouldn't, the Swiss government wouldn't have anything to do with it. It took them about 30 more years to acknowledge that he was a hero. But in the last year of his life, for some people, he became a hero. And they asked him, did he regret what he had done? And he said he didn't regret one minute of it, and if he had to do it again, he would do it again. And when his daughter asked him why he had done it, whenever she asked them throughout his life, he said, I couldn't do anything else. I just couldn't do anything else. And so this, the sociologists, they study this and they go, why is it that an ordinary person who was just a normal, ordinary person like you and me and had no indication of becoming a hero became a hero? And they looked at everything and they couldn't find anything. And finally, they found one thing. There was a difference between him and all the others, and all the other policemen who guarded the border and sent back thousands and thousands of Jews to be killed. All those other captains sat in their offices and sent their underlings out to do the dirty work. And they never faced the people that they sent back to certain death. That's not what Paul Gruninger did. Paul Gruninger's door was open, and all day long people were in his office, and he had to look them in the eye. He had to look the fathers and the children and the mothers in the eyes. He had to hear their cries, and he couldn't send them back. He falsified their documents and sent them through. And the great difference is he didn't protect his heart from the opportunity to care. He didn't protect his heart from the opportunity to care. And he paid for it for 30 years. But he's a hero. But he's also a hero. The sociologists look at him and they can see reasons why he may have, partial reason, but they still don't understand how an ordinary person who was like everybody else could have done something so extraordinary. But I don't think it's all that hard to understand for Christians who believe in the Blessed Trinity. Because what we know about Paul Gruninger is that he had the Trinitarian life of God within him. The Holy Spirit lived within his heart. And the Holy Spirit is one person of a Blessed Trinity. And if the Holy Spirit lives within our hearts, then the Father and the Son and they live in our hearts as well. We have the Blessed Trinity. We participate in the life of the Blessed Trinity that is within us. And that means that Blessed Trinity pours a love into our hearts that is not ours. We don't own it. We only learn how to cooperate with it. And so you and I, the Trinity is not something just far away. We think of the Trinity as something far away, I think. The Blessed Trinity is also among us, and it is also within us by the indwelling of the Holy Spirit. And that means that the Father and the Son, who pour love between one another and who pour their love into the Holy Spirit, they live within us, and that love is poured into our hearts as well. And is it really any different then? Is it really any more extraordinary? Is it really that one Swiss guard cooperated with that love because he let people get to him and he didn't protect his heart from the opportunity to care? Is it really that extraordinary that the love of the Blessed Trinity that was poured into his hearts was moved and he responded as an ordinary person and did something heroic? Is it really that different than parents, than every parent who has children and who sacrifices their life every single day for the well-being and the physical well-being and the emotional well-being of their children, and every day they sacrifice it? What's empowering that love? Isn't that the Blessed Trinity in their hearts? Isn't that the love of the Holy Spirit poured through their hearts by the Father and the Son? Isn't it the power of Jesus Christ within them by the Holy Spirit that makes the feelings of God come alive within them and makes the values and the meanings that Jesus preached in this life come alive in them, and somehow they're moved? And isn't it the love that is of the Blessed Trinity that's in the hearts of all of us that can make a move in our hearts without asking for our permission? And then we decide, are we going to cooperate with it or not? Will we take the risk of cooperating with it or not? I don't think that what happened in the heart of Paul Gruninger is any different than what happens in the hearts of us and all people everywhere. And is it really any different than the woman who said to me the other day, after a big row with her teenage daughter, and then finally, after a lot of tension and difficulty and drama, they had come to a new normal where they could get along again? And she said, it must have been the Spirit of God, because I don't think I could have done it alone. And isn't that right all the time? Isn't it always the Spirit of God that is working within us, that helps us to do and to love in a way that we couldn't on our own? It's that Blessed Trinity. We participate in the life of the divine one who is Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and our own love is lifted up to a higher level by that love. And the only difference between Paul Gruninger and the guards who sent thousands of people back to the death camps is that he let them get into his office. And he didn't isolate his heart from the opportunity to care. That's the big difference. Let us come to the table of the Lord, where We don't isolate ourselves from Christ, but we open ourselves to receive a participation in the life of the Blessed Trinity that has the ability to make us do something, to move us, if we will cooperate with it, to move us to do something extraordinary, something heroic, while we're just being ordinary, average people, the people that we always are. But we're ordinary, average people who participate in the life of the most holy, blessed Trinity, the divine life of a God who is Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.